Dr. Amanda Clark stared at her computer screen and rubbed her tired eyes. It was 3 a.m. at the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex, and she had been working for 12 hours straight. The massive radio dishes outside hummed, quietly in the desert night, listening to the universe for any signs of intelligent life. Amanda had been doing this job for 8 years now. Most nights were quiet. The computers recorded data from distant stars and galaxies, but it was usually just background noise from space. Tonight felt different, though. Her equipment was picking up something strange. The signal appeared on her screen as a series of bright lines and patterns. At first, Amanda thought it might be interference from a satellite or maybe equipment failure. But as she studied the data more carefully, she realized this was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The signal was coming from deep space, far beyond the solar system. It had a mathematical structure that was too complex and organized to be natural. Someone or something was sending this message on purpose. Amanda's hands shook slightly as she began to analyze the signal. The patterns were beautiful and intricate, like a piece of music written in numbers and light. But there was something urgent about it, too, something that made her heart beat faster. She called her assistant, Dr. Ryan Carter, who lived just 20 minutes away. "Ryan, you need to get here right now," she said into her phone. "I think we found something big." Ryan arrived within 15 minutes, still wearing his pajamas under a hastily thrown-on jacket. He was a young man with messy brown hair and thick glasses who had joined Amanda's team just 2 years ago. Despite his youth, he was brilliant with computers and signal analysis. "What do you have?" Ryan asked, pulling up a chair next to Amanda's workstation. "Look at this," Amanda said, pointing to the patterns on her screen. "This signal started coming in about an hour ago. It's not from anywhere in our solar system. The source appears to be about 47 light-years away." Ryan studied the data carefully. His eyes grew wide behind his glasses. "This isn't random. Cosmic radiation," he said quietly. "Someone is trying to communicate." Amanda nodded. "That's what I think, too. But look at this part here." She pointed to a section of the signal that seemed to repeat every few minutes. "I think this might be some kind of distress call." They worked together for the next 3 hours, using the facility's most powerful computers to decode the message. What they discovered made them both fall silent with amazement. The signal contained star maps showing the location of the sender. It included mathematical formulas that described their technology and their situation. Most importantly, it contained what could only be described as a desperate plea for help. The message came from a species that called themselves the Viridian Collective. Their home star was dying much faster than it should have been. According to their data, another alien race called the Devourers had somehow made their star unstable. It would explode in just a few months, killing billions of innocent people. Viridians had sent this message as a wide broadcast to anyone who might be listening. They were hoping that some advanced civilization would hear their call and come to help them evacuate their world. "Amanda," Ryan said slowly, "do you realize what this means? They're asking for help, but they probably don't even know we exist. Earth isn't supposed to be advanced enough to detect this kind of signal, let alone respond to it." Amanda stared at the translation on her screen. The Viridians' message was filled with technical details about their situation, but underneath all the science, she could feel their fear and desperation. These were people facing the end of their world, sending out one last hope into the darkness of space. "We have to tell someone," Amanda said. "This is too big for just us to handle." At 6 a.m, Amanda called Dr. Patricia Hayes, the administrator of NASA. Patricia was a tough woman in her 50s, who had worked her way up through the space agency over 25 years. She was known for making quick decisions and taking calculated risks. "Patricia, I'm sorry to wake you, but we have a situation here that requires immediate attention. Amanda said. Patricia listened carefully as Amanda explained their discovery. There was a long silence on the phone when Amanda finished talking. "You're absolutely certain this is real?" Patricia asked finally. "As certain as I can be," Amanda replied. "We've run every test we can think of. This is definitely an artificial signal from an intelligent species, and they're asking for help." "I'll be there in 4 hours," Patricia said. "Don't talk to anyone else about this until I arrive. And Amanda, make sure you keep recording everything." By 10 that morning, the Goldstone facility was buzzing with activity. Patricia had arrived with a team of experts, including General Nathan Brooks from the newly formed United Earth Space Command. Nathan was a career military officer who had been put in charge of Earth's first real space defense program. The team spent the entire day analyzing Amanda and Ryan's data. They brought in linguists, mathematicians, physicists, and computer specialists. Every test confirmed what Amanda had discovered. The signal was real, and the Viridians were in terrible danger. "The question now," General Brooks said during their evening meeting, "is what we do about it. Even if we wanted to help these people, we don't have the technology to travel 47 light years. Our fastest ships would take thousands of years to reach them." Dr. Hayes looked at the translated message on the big screen in their conference room. "But they've included technical specifications in their signal," she said. "Look at these sections. Here, they're showing us how their faster-than-light communication works. Maybe we can figure out how to build our own version." Amanda had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now she spoke up. "There's something else," she said. "I've been monitoring the signal all day, and it's getting weaker. I think their situation is getting worse. If we're going to do something to help them, we don't have much time." The room fell silent as everyone considered the enormous challenge they were facing. Earth had never encountered alien life before. They had no protocols for this situation, no technology that could cross interstellar space in a reasonable time, and no way of knowing if they could trust these aliens. But as they looked at the data, one thing became clear. The Viridians were not asking Earth for help specifically. They had sent their message out blindly, hoping that someone, somewhere, might have the ability and the willingness to assist them. General Brooks stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun. "They don't even know we exist," he said quietly. "For all they know, we're just another primitive species that hasn't developed space travel yet." "That's exactly why we have to try," Patricia said firmly. "This isn't just about helping the Viridians. This is about what kind of species we want to be when we finally join the galactic community. Do we want to be the kind of people who ignore cries for help because it's too difficult or too dangerous?" Amanda looked around the room at all the serious faces. These were some of the smartest and most powerful people on Earth, and they were seriously considering attempting the impossible. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. "What would we need to do?" she asked. General Brooks turned back to the group. "We'd need to build ships that can travel faster than anything we've ever created. We'd need to develop new technologies based on alien science that we barely understand. And we'd need to do it all in a matter of months, not years." Dr. Hayes smiled grimly. "Then we better get started." As the sun set over the Goldstone facility that evening, a small group of humans made a decision that would change the course of their species forever. They would answer the call for help, even though it was never meant for them. They would risk everything to save a people they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. The signal was never meant for humans, but they were going to respond anyway. 6 months later, Commander Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant and watched Earth grow smaller in the main view screen. Behind his ship, 4 other vessels followed in formation. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever sent. Beyond the solar system, and everyone knew it might be their last. Jake was 42 years old and had been in the space program for 15 years. He had commanded missions to Mars and the asteroid belt, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. They were about to attempt the first human journey to another star system, using technology they barely understood. All ships report ready. For jump sequence, called out Communications Officer Ryan Carter from his station. Ryan had volunteered to join the mission after helping to decode the original Viridian signal. His expertise with alien communication systems made him invaluable. To the crew, Chief Engineer Lisa Martinez looked up from her control panel with a worried expression. Lisa was a small woman with graying hair who had spent 20 years keeping spacecraft running. She had worked day and night for months to build the experimental jump drive that would make this journey possible. "Commander, I have to be honest with you," Lisa said quietly. "This jump drive is based on Viridian technology that we've only partially decoded. We've never tested it at this range before. There's a real chance we might not survive the jump." Jake nodded grimly. They all knew the risks. The Viridian technical specifications had been incomplete, forcing human engineers to fill in the gaps with educated guesses and hope. 3 test flights in the outer solar system had been successful, but this would be different. They were about to attempt a jump of 47 light years, the farthest any human had ever traveled. "The Viridians are still broadcasting," Ryan reported, "but their signal is much weaker now. I estimate they have less than 2 weeks before their star goes supernova." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These were some of Earth's best and brightest, all volunteers who had left their families behind to attempt the impossible. Pilot Sarah Kim sat at the helm controls, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. She was only 28 years old, but had the best reflexes and spatial awareness of any pilot in the fleet. "All right, people," Jake said. "Let's go save some aliens." The jump drive engaged with a sound like thunder. Space around the fleet twisted and bent in ways that hurt to look at. Jake felt his stomach lurch as reality seemed to fold in on itself. Then, suddenly, they were somewhere else entirely. The Viridian star system spread out before them, and it was even worse than they had expected. The central star was visibly unstable, its surface writhing with massive solar flares. The 4th planet in the system, where the Viridians lived, was being bombarded with deadly radiation. "My God," whispered Sarah Kim. "How are they still alive?" "Down there?" Their answer came immediately. Sleek, dark ships appeared on their sensors, moving to intercept the human fleet. These were not Viridian vessels. According to the alien broadcasts, these belonged to the Devourers, the species responsible for destabilizing the Viridian star. "Incoming transmission," Ryan announced. "It's not in any human language, but the computer is translating it." A harsh, mechanical voice filled the bridge. "Unknown vessels, you are trespassing in a restricted system. This star and its planets belong to the Devourer Empire. Leave immediately or be destroyed." Jake stepped forward. "This is Commander Jake Sullivan of the United Earth Fleet. We're here on a humanitarian mission to evacuate the Viridian population. We have no quarrel with your empire." The response was immediate laughter, cold and cruel. "Humans? The primitive species from the 3rd planet of Sol? You have traveled far from your small world only to die here. We will allow you to leave if you go now. This is your only warning." Jake looked at his crew. Every face showed the same expression of determination, mixed with fear. They had come too far to turn back now. "We're not leaving without the Viridians," Jake said firmly. The Devourer ships opened fire without another word. Energy beams sliced through space toward the human fleet. The weapons were far more advanced than anything Earth had ever developed. But the human ships had one advantage the Devourers hadn't expected: unpredictability. Evasive maneuvers Jake ordered. All ships, scatter pattern Delta. The human fleet broke formation in a way that seemed chaotic, but was actually carefully coordinated. Sarah Kim threw the Defiant into a spinning dive that avoided 3 separate energy beams by mere meters. The other ships followed similar erratic patterns, making it impossible for the Devourers to target them effectively. Their weapons are more powerful, Lisa reported, but they're designed to fight ships that move in predictable patterns. They're having trouble with our flight style. Jake smiled grimly. Humans had learned to fight by studying each other for thousands of years. Their military tactics were based on deception, surprise, and adaptation. The Devourers, it seemed, were used to enemies that fought more conventionally. Sarah, take us in close to that big ship, Jake ordered. Lisa, prepare. The mining charges. The Defiant accelerated toward the largest Devourer vessel, a massive cruiser bristling with weapons. The alien ship turned to bring its guns to bear, but Sarah's piloting kept them just out of effective range while closing the distance rapidly. Mining charges ready, Lisa announced. The charges were actually mining equipment that had been modified for combat. Since Earth had no real space weapons, they had improvised with industrial tools. Fire, Jake ordered. The charges shot out of the Defiant's cargo bay and attached to the Devourer cruiser's hull. The explosion that followed was spectacular, tearing a huge hole in the alien ship's side. The cruiser spun out of control, its weapon systems failing. Across the battlespace, the other human ships were using similar tactics. Captain Tony Walker in the vessel, Newton had rigged his ship's construction robots to act as boarding drones. They cut through the hull of a Devourer destroyer and began dismantling its internal systems from the inside. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Foster, commanding the military escort ship Guardian, had turned his vessel into a flying missile. He rammed it directly into a group of Devourer fighters, taking out 6 enemy ships at the cost of his own. Foster and his crew ejected in escape pods just before impact, but their sacrifice had cleared the way for the other ships to reach the planet. We're getting a transmission from the surface, Ryan announced. It's the Viridians. They want to know who we are and why we're here. Jake took a deep breath. This would be humanity's first official contact with an alien species. Tell them we received their distress call. We're here to help evacuate their people. There was a long pause before the response came. When it did, the alien voice sounded shocked and confused. You are from the species called humans? But your civilization is barely capable of space travel. How did you cross the interstellar void? We figured it out, Jake replied simply. Your technical specifications helped us build a jump drive. It's not pretty, but it works. Another pause. You came all this way to help us? But we have never met your species. We have no alliance or trade agreement. Why would you risk your lives for strangers? Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all listening to this conversation, and he could see the pride in their faces. This was what made humans special. This was why they had come. Because you asked for help, Jake said, and because it was the right thing to do. The Viridians. Response came faster this time, and there was emotion in the translated voice. We have sent our distress call to 47 different star systems. You are the first to respond. The first to come. Well, we're here now, Jake said. What do you need us to do? Over the next few hours, the human fleet worked with Viridian ground controllers to coordinate an evacuation. The alien planet's population was enormous, nearly 8 billion individuals spread across several continents. The Viridians had their own transport ships, but many had been sabotaged by Devourer infiltrators. Lisa Martinez worked with Viridian engineers to jury-rig new evacuation vessels, using human construction techniques and alien technology. The results were ugly but functional spacecraft that could carry thousands of refugees at a time. "Human engineering is very different from ours," commented one Viridian scientist over the radio. "Your designs are less elegant, but they are remarkably practical. You seem to specialize in making complex things work with simple solutions." As the evacuation continued, more Devourer ships arrived in the system. The enemy fleet was now 10 times larger than the human force, but Jake's ships continued to harass them using hit-and-run tactics. They couldn't win a direct confrontation, but they could buy time for the refugees to escape. Sarah Kim led a squadron of improvised fighters in a daring attack on the Devourer command ship. The fighters were actually construction pods fitted with mining lasers, but in Sarah's hands they became deadly weapons. She managed to destroy the enemy's communication array before retreating, throwing their fleet coordination into chaos. "Commander," Ryan called out urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup in the star. The Viridians say it's going to explode much sooner than predicted. We have maybe 48 hours before this entire system becomes uninhabitable." Jake felt his stomach drop. They had evacuated less than half the Viridian population, and now they were running out of. Fleet Admiral Kevin Price had been promoted just 6 hours ago, after the previous admiral was killed in a Devourer attack. Now he stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the largest enemy fleet anyone had ever seen approach his fore. Remaining ships. Kevin was 55 years old and had spent his entire adult life in space. He had commanded cargo runs to Mars, exploration missions to Jupiter's moons, and research expeditions to the asteroid belt. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. 237 enemy ships confirmed, reported Communications Officer Ryan Carter. His voice was steady, but Kevin could see the fear in the young man's eyes. "They have us outnumbered almost 60 to 1. On the main screen, the Devourer fleet looked like a swarm of angry insects. Their ships were dark and angular, designed for one purpose: destruction. At the center of the formation was their flagship, a massive dreadnought. It was larger than all 4 human ships combined. "Admiral," called out Chief Engineer Lisa Martinez from her station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from that big ship. Whatever weapons it's carrying, they're unlike anything we've seen before." Kevin nodded grimly. The human fleet had already lost 8 ships in the fighting over the past 3 days. The Newton had been destroyed while ramming a Devourer cruiser. The Guardian had been cut in half by enemy fire while defending an evacuation convoy. 6 other vessels had been lost in various skirmishes, their crews sacrificing themselves to buy time for the refugees. Now only 4 ships remained: the Defiant, the Horizon, the Phoenix, and the Endeavor. Between them, they carried fewer than 2,000 crew members. They were about to face an enemy fleet that could have conquered entire star systems. "Sir," said pilot Sarah Kim from the helm, "the last evacuation ships are still loading refugees on the planet's surface. They need at least 2 more hours to complete the operation." Kevin looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people, the best humanity had to offer. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never see Earth again. Now, they were being asked to die to protect aliens they had met just a few days ago. "Open a channel to all ships," Kevin ordered. Ryan's fingers moved over his controls. "Channel open, sir." Kevin took a deep breath. "This is Admiral Price to all human vessels. I won't lie to you about our situation. We're facing impossible odds against an enemy that wants to prevent us from saving innocent lives. Some of you have families back on Earth. Some of you have dreams and plans for the future. I'm about to ask you to give all of that up." He paused, looking at the enemy fleet on his screen. "But I'm also asking you to be part of something bigger than yourselves. Today, we get to show the galaxy what humanity is really about. We get to prove that some things are worth dying for, even if those things don't benefit us directly. The responses came back immediately from the other ships. Captain Bill Hudson on the horizon. We're with you, Admiral. Commander Janet Mills on the Phoenix. Ready to fight, sir. Captain Robert King on the Endeavor. Let's give them hell. Kevin smiled despite the situation. All right, people. Let's buy our friends on the planet as much time as we can. The battle began when the Devourer flagship opened fire with a weapon that turned space itself into a cutting beam. The energy blast missed the Defiant by mere kilometers, but Kevin could feel the heat through the ship's hull. All ships, scatter formation, Kevin ordered. Don't let them focus their fire on any one target. The 4 human ships broke apart, each one heading in a different direction. It was a tactic born of desperation, but it forced the massive Devourer fleet to split their attention. Sarah Kim threw the Defiant into a spinning dive that took them through the middle of the enemy formation. Devourer ships fired from all directions, but Sarah's unpredictable flight path made her impossible to target effectively. She was flying like a woman possessed, using every trick she had learned during her years as a test pilot. Lisa, what do we have for weapons? Kevin asked. Mining charges, construction lasers, and about 50 cargo containers filled with metal debris, Lisa replied. Oh, and I've rigged the main reactor to overload if we need it. Kevin raised an eyebrow. Overload the reactor? It would create a small artificial black hole, Lisa explained calmly. Completely destroy everything within about 50 kilometers, including us. But it might take some of them with us. On the other side of the battle, the Phoenix was using its construction robots as weapons. Commander Janet Mills had reprogrammed the robots to attach explosive charges to enemy ships. It was dangerous work that required getting very close to the Devourer vessels, but Janet was an experienced pilot who specialized in precision flying. Phoenix to Defiant, Janet's voice came over the radio. I've taken out 3 of their destroyers, but my ship is badly damaged. I don't think I can maneuver much longer. Understood, Phoenix, Kevin replied. Fall back to defensive position. But Janet had other plans. Negative, Admiral. I'm going to try to reach their flagship. If I can get close enough, maybe I can do some real damage. Kevin watched on his screen as the Phoenix accelerated toward the massive Devourer dreadnought. The enemy ship's weapons focused on the approaching human vessel, filling space with deadly energy beams. Janet's ship took hit after hit, pieces of hull spinning away into the darkness. Janet, get out of there, Kevin ordered. Your ship can't take much more damage. Almost there, Janet replied through static. Her voice was strained but determined. Tell my kids back on Earth that their mom did something important today. The Phoenix slammed into the Devourer flagship's command section at full speed. The explosion lit up the entire battle area, and when the light faded, both ships were gone. Janet Mills and her crew of 43 had died, but they had taken the enemy's command ship with them. The loss of their flagship threw the Devourer fleet into confusion. Without central coordination, their attacks became less effective, but they still outnumbered the humans by enormous odds. Engineer Carlos Rivera on the Endeavor had been working frantically to modify the remaining weapons. Carlos was a creative problem solver who specialized in making broken things work again. He had taken their mining equipment and turned it into ship killers. Endeavor to Defiant, Carlos reported over the radio. I've rigged our mining charges with proximity sensors. They'll act like guided missiles now. Good work, Carlos, Kevin replied. Take out as many as you can. The Endeavor launched its improvised missiles at a group of Devourer cruisers. The explosions were spectacular, destroying 4 enemy ships and damaging several others. But the success came at a cost. Return fire from the Devourers crippled the Endeavor's engines, leaving the ship drifting helplessly. Captain Robert King ordered his crew to abandon ship, but half of them refused to leave. "If we're going to die anyway," said Sergeant Pete Johnson, the ship's Marine commander, "we might as well take some of them with us." Pete led a boarding party of 20 Marines onto the nearest Devourer ship. They had no advanced weapons, just basic firearms and improvised explosives. But they had something the Devourers didn't expect: absolute determination to cause as much damage as possible. The Marines fought their way through the alien ship's corridors, destroying everything they could find. Pete himself made it to the ship's reactor room, where he detonated his remaining explosives. The resulting chain reaction destroyed the Devourer vessel and damaged 2 others nearby. Meanwhile, the Horizon was making its own desperate attack run. Captain Bill Hudson had been a commercial pilot before joining the space program, and he flew his ship like a man with nothing to lose. He used the Horizon as a battering ram, smashing through smaller Devourer ships while his crew fired everything they had. "Bill, your ship is breaking apart," Kevin warned over the radio. "I know," Bill replied calmly. "But look how many of them we're taking with us." The Horizon's final moments were spectacular. Bill aimed his disintegrating ship at a cluster of Devourer vessels and activated the emergency self-destruct. The explosion created a chain reaction that destroyed 6 enemy ships and left a gap in their formation. Now only the Defiant remained, alone against more than 200 enemy vessels. Kevin looked around his bridge at the surviving crew members. Ryan Carter was still at his communication station, his face pale but determined. Lisa Martinez continued working at her engineering controls, trying to keep their damaged systems running. Sarah Kim gripped the helm controls, ready to fly them into hell if necessary. "Admiral," Ryan reported, "I'm getting a transmission from the planet. The last evacuation ship has just launched. All Viridian refugees who wanted to leave have been evacuated." Kevin felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had done it. Against all odds, they had saved an entire civilization. The cost had been enormous, but it had been worth it. "That's good news," Kevin said quietly. "At least we accomplished our mission." The Devourer fleet was closing in from all sides now. The remaining ships formed a tight sphere around the Defiant, preparing to finish off the last human vessel. Kevin could see the hatred in their formation. The humans had embarrassed them, cost them dozens of ships, and ruined their plans to destroy the Viridians. "Lisa," Kevin said, "how long would it take to overload the reactor?" "About 30 seconds, she replied. "But Admiral, if we create an artificial black hole?" Science Director Kale stood on the bridge of the Viridian refugee ship and watched the place where the used Defiant had been just moments before. The artificial black hole had collapsed, leaving only empty space and debris from dozens of destroyed Devourer vessels. The humans were gone, but their sacrifice had saved his entire civilization. "Sir," one of his technicians reported, "the remaining Devourer ships are retreating. It appears they're abandoning the system." Kale nodded slowly. The enemy fleet had been broken by the humans' final desperate attack. Without their flagship and command structure, the surviving Devourers seemed to have lost their will to fight. They were fleeing the system, leaving behind the ruins of their invasion force. "What about the human survivors?" Kale asked. "We're detecting several escape pods from their destroyed ships," the technician replied. "Total human survivors appear to be fewer than 200 individuals out of their original crew of 2,000. Kale felt his heart sink. These brave people had traveled across the galaxy to help complete strangers, and they had paid a terrible price for their compassion. The least his people could do was ensure the survivors were rescued and cared for. "Dispatch all available ships to collect the human survivors," Kale ordered. "Treat them as honored guests. They are heroes who saved our entire species." As the Viridian rescue ships spread out to collect the human escape pods, Kale activated the long-range communication array. The story of what had happened here needed to be told. The galaxy needed to know about the species that had answered a call for help that was never meant for them. Dr. Emma Rodriguez floated in her escape pod, somewhere in the debris field, watching the Viridian rescue ships approach. Emma was a linguist who had been part of the ground team on the planet's surface. She had survived the destruction of the Phoenix when Commander Janet Mills ordered all non-essential personnel to evacuate before her final attack run. Emma's pod was picked up by a Viridian medical ship. As she was brought aboard, she was amazed by the gentleness of her rescuers. The Viridians treated her injuries with advanced medical techniques while expressing deep gratitude for humanity's sacrifice. Dr. Rodriguez, said the Viridian medical officer who was treating her burns, "We have been monitoring your species' radio transmissions to learn more about you. We are curious about something. Your planet has many different nations and cultures, often in conflict with each other. Yet you came together to help us. How is this possible?" Emma smiled weakly. "Because when someone needs help, those differences don't matter anymore. We're all human beings, and human beings help each other when it counts." Over the next few days, as the Viridian fleet traveled toward a safe system far from their destroyed homeworld, more survivors were rescued. Commander Jake Sullivan was found badly injured but alive in the wreckage of an auxiliary craft. Pilot Sarah Kim had survived by ejecting from her fighter just before it was destroyed. Chief Engineer Lisa Martinez was discovered unconscious, breathing in an escape pod that had drifted far from the battle dot. In total, 187 humans had survived the battle. It was a small number compared to the 8 billion Viridians they had saved, but each survivor carried with them the story of humanity's first contact with alien life. The news of the human rescue spread through galactic communication networks faster than anyone expected. Within days, every major civilization in the local galactic arm had heard about the species that had answered a distress call never meant for them. The reaction was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. For thousands of years, interstellar politics had been dominated by caution, calculation, and self-interest. Species helped each other only when there was clear benefit to themselves. The idea of risking everything for complete strangers was almost incomprehensible to most galactic civilizations. On the water world of Aquarius, the Council of Depths held an emergency session to discuss the human actions. Elder Flowing Current spoke for many when he said, "These humans are either the most foolish species we have ever encountered, or the most noble. I believe they may be both." The silicon-based Crystalline Confederation issued a formal statement. Through their crystal matrices, the human response to the Viridian crisis demonstrates a form of intelligence we had not previously recognized. They appear to prioritize moral considerations over practical survival calculations. This is highly unusual, but remarkably effective. Even the galaxy's most powerful empire, the hegemony of 5 suns, took notice. Their Supreme Council issued a rare public communication. "The actions of the human species in the Viridian system have been noted. Any civilization capable of such selfless courage deserves respect, regardless of their technological level." But it wasn't just governments that were talking about humanity. On 1,000 different worlds, ordinary people were discussing the strange species that had risked everything for strangers. The humans had become something that rarely existed in galactic politics. Genuine heroes. Back in the Viridian refugee fleet, Dr. Emma Rodriguez had been appointed as humanity's unofficial ambassador. She spent her days in meetings with Viridian leaders, helping to establish formal diplomatic relations between their species. Dr. Rodriguez, Science Director Kale said during one of their meetings, "We have received communication requests from 47 different star systems. Everyone wants to know more about humanity. You have become quite famous across the galaxy." Emma laughed. "I'm not sure we're ready for fame. We're still figuring out how to be a spacefaring species ourselves. Perhaps that is exactly why the galaxy needs you, Kale replied thoughtfully. Most advanced civilizations have forgotten what it means to act purely from moral conviction. You have reminded us all of something important. 3 weeks after the battle, the Viridian fleet reached the sanctuary system where they would establish their new home. It was a beautiful system with 3 habitable planets and abundant resources. The Viridians would survive and eventually rebuild their civilization. Commander Jake Sullivan, now recovered enough to walk with the help of a medical device, stood in the observation deck of the main refugee ship and watched the new world grow larger on the screen. Beside him, Science Director Kale was also watching their future home. Commander, Kale said quietly, how do we repay a debt like this? Your species saved our entire civilization and asked for nothing in return. How do we honor such a gift? Jake considered the question carefully. You honor it by remembering, he said finally. Remember that someone heard your call for help and came, even when they shouldn't have been able to. Remember that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. And maybe someday, when you hear someone else calling for help, you'll remember us and decide to answer. The establishment of New Viridia proceeded smoothly over the following months. The Viridians used their advanced technology to quickly build cities and infrastructure on their new world. But they also did something unprecedented in galactic history. They dedicated 20% of their new planet to a memorial for the humans who had died saving them. The Memorial of Distant Friends was built in the center of New Viridia's capital city. It contained the names of every human who had participated in the rescue mission, along with detailed records of their sacrifice. At the center of the memorial was a simple message in both Viridian script and English. They heard our call. They came. They died for strangers. This is what true civilization looks like. As word of the memorial spread throughout the galaxy, something unexpected began to happen. Other species started to respond differently to distress calls and requests for help. The Aquarian Council authorized their first humanitarian mission to assist a plague-stricken colony. The Crystalline Confederation offered technological aid to a struggling civilization, asking for nothing in return. Most surprising of all, even some of the Devourer's subject species began to rebel against their oppressors. The human example had shown them that it was possible to stand up for what was right, even against overwhelming odds. 6 months after the rescue, Earth received its first formal invitation to join the Galactic Council. The message was delivered by a joint delegation of 12 different species, all of whom wanted to meet the people who had redefined what it meant to be civilized. Captain Helen Clark, newly appointed as Earth's first interstellar representative, prepared to address the Galactic Council for the first time. Helen was a career diplomat who had spent years preparing for the possibility of first contact. But nothing could have prepared her for the responsibility of representing her species to the entire galaxy. The council chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from hundreds of different worlds. As Helen walked to the speaking platform, she could feel thousands of alien eyes watching her every move. Some were curious, some were respectful, and some were openly amazed that such a young species had earned a place in this ancient assembly. Honored representatives, Helen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. I stand before you today, not as a conqueror or a traitor or a petitioner for aid. I come as a neighbor, representing a species that believes in a simple principle. When someone calls for help, you answer if you can. The chamber was completely silent as she continued. 6 months ago, we received a signal that was. Dr. Tony Walker stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the surface of the Viridian homeworld for the first time. The air was thick and humid, filled with strange scents that his environmental suit filtered out. Above him, the unstable star cast an orange glow that made everything look like it was on fire. Tony was a xenobiologist, one of Earth's leading experts on the possibility of alien life. For years, he had studied and theorized about what other intelligent species might be. Now he was about to meet them face to face. A Viridian welcoming committee was waiting for him at the spaceport. They were tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Their leader, who introduced himself as Science Director Kale, spoke through a translation device that turned his musical language into understandable English. "Dr. Walker, we are honored by your presence," Kale said, bowing slightly. "Though we must admit, we are also confused. Your species was not supposed to be advanced enough to detect our signal, much less respond to it." Tony smiled behind his helmet's faceplate. "We're full of surprises. The important thing is that we're here now, and we want to help. What do you need us to do?" Kale led Tony through the spaceport, past crowds of Viridian families waiting to board evacuation ships. The aliens moved with fluid grace, but Tony could see the fear in their large eyes. Children clung to their parents, while adults carried small bags containing their most precious possessions. "The situation is worse than we initially reported," Kale explained as they walked. "The Devourers have been sabotaging our evacuation systems for months. Many of our transport ships have been damaged beyond repair. We estimate that we can only evacuate about 30% of our population with our remaining vessels." They entered a large command center where Viridian technicians worked frantically at control panels that seemed to be made of living crystal. The technology was beautiful, but completely alien to anything Tony had ever seen. "Your commander said, 'You might be able to help us build more ships,'" Kale continued, "but I do not understand how. Your technology is so different from ours." Tony studied the Viridian equipment carefully. "Different doesn't mean incompatible," he said. "Our chief, Engineer Lisa Martinez, has been working with your technical specifications. She thinks we can combine human manufacturing techniques with Viridian technology to create hybrid evacuation vessels." Over the next 12 hours, Tony watched as human and Viridian engineers worked together to create something neither species could have built alone. The humans contributed their practical knowledge of mass production and resource efficiency. The Viridians provided advanced materials and energy systems. Captain Maria Santos arrived with the first construction team from the fleet. Maria was a tough woman who had managed Earth's largest space construction projects. She took one look at the Viridian manufacturing facilities and immediately began reorganizing them for maximum efficiency. "The problem with your production line," Maria explained to the Viridian engineers, "is that you're trying to make each ship perfect. We don't have time for perfect. We need functional ships that can carry people safely, and we need them fast." The Viridians watched in amazement as the humans streamlined their manufacturing process. Where the aliens had been carefully crafting each component, the humans introduced assembly line techniques that could produce dozens of parts simultaneously. The resulting ships were less elegant than traditional Viridian designs, but they could be built in a fraction of the time. "Your species approaches problems very differently than we do," observed Kale as he watched a completed evacuation ship roll off the production line. "We focus on perfection and beauty. You focus on function and speed. Right now, speed is what matters," Maria replied. "We can worry about making things pretty after everyone is safe." While the evacuation efforts continued, the battle in space grew more intense. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Foster, now commanding from a replacement ship after his previous vessel was destroyed, coordinated the defense of the planet against increasingly desperate Devourer attacks. Ben was a career military officer who had fought in Earth's last major war. He was skilled at making difficult decisions under pressure, and this situation was testing all of his abilities. The Devourer fleet now outnumbered the humans 20-1, but Ben's forces continued to use unconventional tactics to stay alive. Weakness is that they fight like a conventional military. Ben explained to his staff during a brief tactical meeting. They expect us to follow standard space combat doctrine. But we're not a standard military. We're explorers and scientists and engineers who happen to be carrying weapons. The humans had turned their exploration ships into improvised warships. Mining lasers became weapons. Construction robots became boarding parties, and cargo containers became missile launchers. It was chaotic and dangerous, but it was working. Pilot Sarah Kim had become something of a legend among both human and Viridian forces. She led a squadron of modified construction pods in daily raids against Devourer positions. Her tactics were so unpredictable that the enemy had started calling her the Ghost because she seemed to appear and disappear at will. The key to fighting a superior enemy, Sarah explained to a group of Viridian pilots who were learning human tactics, is to never do what they expect. If they think you'll go left, go right. If they think you'll retreat, attack. If they think you'll attack, do something completely different. On the planet's surface, the evacuation was making steady progress. The hybrid human Viridian ships were ugly but effective, capable of carrying thousands of refugees at a time. However, everyone knew they were racing against time. The star's instability was increasing daily, and massive solar flares were beginning to disrupt electronic systems across the planet. Dr. Amanda Clark, the astronomer who had first detected the Viridian signal, arrived with the second wave of human ships. She had insisted on joining the mission, despite having no military or engineering training. Her job was to monitor the star's condition and predict how much time they had left. The star is deteriorating faster than our models predicted, Amanda reported during a joint human-Viridian science meeting. The Devourers seem to have planted some kind of devices in the star's core that are accelerating the fusion process. At this rate, we have maybe 36 hours before the supernova begins. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. They had evacuated about 60% of the planet's population, but that still left more than 3 billion people waiting for rescue. Can we remove the devices? Asked Kale hopefully. Amanda shook her head. They're buried too deep in the star's core. The radiation and heat would destroy any ship that tried to reach them. The Devourers planned this very carefully. As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Ryan Carter's voice came over the communication system from the fleet above. All ground teams, this is Ryan Carter on the Defiant. We have a massive Devourer fleet approaching the system. It looks like they're bringing everything they have for a final assault. We count at least 200 ships, including several dreadnoughts. Everyone in the command center looked at each other with growing dread. The human fleet had been outnumbered before, but this was impossible odds. 200 ships against their remaining 4 vessels. Commander Jake Sullivan's voice came over the radio, calm and steady despite the situation. All evacuation teams, continue your work. We'll hold them off as long as we can. Every minute we buy you is more lives saved. Tony. Walker watched the Viridian faces around him. These were a peaceful people who had never experienced war until the Devourers came. They had spent their civilization focused on art, science, and philosophy. Now they were facing extinction, and their only hope was a small group of humans who had traveled across the galaxy to help them. Dr. Walker, Kale said quietly, why did your people really come here? We have nothing to offer you. We cannot repay this debt. Your species gains nothing by saving us. Tony thought about the question carefully. It was something he had asked himself many times during the long journey from Earth. Why had humanity risked everything for a species they had never met? Because you asked for help, Tony said finally. And because we could help. That's enough. Kale's large eyes studied Tony's face through the helmet's faceplate. Your species is very young compared to most galactic civilizations. You have only just begun to explore space. Yet you show a wisdom that many older species have lost. Maybe that's why we came? Tony replied. We're too young to know that some things are impossible. Outside the command center, the evacuation continued at a frantic pace. Human and Viridian workers loaded the last groups of refugees onto transport ships while above them. A battle was beginning that would decide the fate of billions of lives. The hybrid ships that had been hastily constructed were not beautiful, but they were filled with hope. Each vessel carried thousands of Viridian families toward safety, their lives saved by the combined efforts of two species who had met only days before dot as the largest evacuation ship lifted off from the spaceport. Tony watched it disappear into the orange sky. Inside that ship were children who would grow up free because humans and Viridians had worked together. They would remember this day and the lesson it taught.